What you're about to hear is not inspiration. It's mental warfare, raw, unfiltered, and dangerous, especially if you're introverted. Because the truth is, introverts are either silent kings or silent casualties. There's no middle ground anymore. You either become someone others can't ignore, or you stay stuck inside your own overthinking, self-sabotage, and emotional drain until it eventually breaks you. This is not about fixing shyness or boosting confidence with surface tricks. This is about flipping a switch in your mind that rewires how you respond to pressure, stress, disrespect, and fear. But here's the cost. Once you activate this energy shift, you will never see the world or yourself the same way again. You will either evolve into someone incredibly composed, unstoppable, and cold under fire, or you'll lose the parts of you that make you human, connection, softness, empathy. That's the brutal trade-off, and you need to know it now. This hack doesn't make you more social. It makes you dangerous in silence. When used correctly, it lets you sit in chaos without flinching. But used recklessly, it numbs your ability to feel joy, vulnerability, even love. Take Matt, a software developer, brilliant, quiet, emotionally intelligent. He found this mental override during a public failure that almost ended his career. He stopped reacting, stopped over-apologizing, and began using stillness like a shield. He rose fast, got promoted, respected, feared even. But now, he can't remember the last time he cried, laughed uncontrollably, or felt present with someone he cared about. He did not burn out. He iced over. That's the edge we're standing on. If you're not careful, you'll trade peace for power and never even notice until it's too late. But if you are careful, if you master it, you'll become what most people fear. Someone who doesn't flinch under pressure, who doesn't need noise to control a room, who commands silently. You're not going to be more likable, you're going to be untouchable. But once this switch flips, there's no turning it off. Your old identity dies here. Why introverts break under pressure? Introverts often seem calm on the outside, but under pressure their internal world becomes overwhelming. They don't explode outwardly like extroverts. Instead, they implode. Stress doesn't bounce off. It gets absorbed, overanalyzed, and stored. When pressure builds, introverts don't lack emotion, they carry too much of it. They replay conversations, rethink decisions, and anticipate worst-case scenarios. This emotional overload is silent, invisible, and constant. It's not weakness, it's intensity without release. Neurologically, introverts show higher baseline activity in the prefrontal cortex, especially the medial prefrontal area, linked to self-reflection and internal narrative. That means they're thinking more, especially under stress. Every situation turns into a loop of questions. What did I miss? Was that wrong? Should I have done more? This hyperactive self-monitoring, while useful in moderation, quickly becomes paralyzing. When pressure hits, this loop intensifies. Instead of reacting fast, introverts freeze in thought. Their brain doesn't lack input. It's flooded. On top of that, dopamine processing plays a key role. Introverts have a lower dopamine threshold. What excites or motivates others might feel overwhelming or even draining to them. High stimulation environments, especially high-stress ones, flood their brain with dopamine, triggering discomfort instead of energy. Under pressure, where dopamine spikes are common, introverts don't get energized, they shut down or burn out. Then there's the emotional suppression. Most introverts don't vent when overwhelmed, they contain. But emotion that's held in doesn't disappear. It compresses. Over time, this silent accumulation leads to burnout. Not because they feel too little, but because they feel too much and say nothing. The cost is mental fatigue, lowered focus, emotional disconnection, and eventually collapse, often behind closed doors. Brain imaging confirms this. Under social or evaluative stress, introverts show increased activation in areas tied to threat detection and internal processing, while extroverts show more motor readiness. That means, while others prepare to act, introverts prepare to endure. And when endurance reaches its edge with no release, the mind starts to fracture, not outwardly, but silently. Phase 1. override, trigger. Your breaking point is your power. There's a moment right before everything falls apart. When your chest tightens, your thoughts blur and your body feels like it's going to shut down. Most people break there. They spiral into panic, self-doubt, or emotional freeze. But this is also the moment where something far more powerful can happen. If you train yourself, that exact second becomes your override point. The shift where fear doesn't control you, you control fear. It's a neurological snap, switching from the limbic system, where emotions and survival instincts take over, to the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain built for logic, decision-making, and performance. That shift doesn't happen through willpower alone. It needs a physical and mental jolt. Here's how you do it. Take a sharp breath in, tighten your fists hard, recruit muscle tension across your body. Now hold. 5 seconds. Your brain gets flooded with an immediate burst of clarity. Add a cold stimulus, splash water on your face, hold something frozen. That physical shock disrupts your emotional buildup instantly. Right here, speak one command out loud. Not a mantra, a command. One short phrase that tells your brain who's in control. Lock in. Silence is strength. Stand sharp. The words must be hardwired to your identity. You're not calming yourself. You're overriding the panic signal. Your nervous system needs proof that someone's in charge. This method works because your body listens faster than your thoughts. Your breathing, muscles, and voice become the authority when your emotions are screaming. Elite operatives use similar overrides in high-threat scenarios. Athletes use it before they step into pressure they can't afford to feel. You do this, and your brain learns, at the edge of chaos, it doesn't collapse. It activates. Phase 2. The energy reversal mechanism. Every emotion you feel, rage, fear, shame, excitement, is raw chemical energy. It's cortisol, dopamine, adrenaline, and serotonin surging through your system. When ignored or suppressed, it doesn't vanish. It lingers, stagnates, and turns toxic. Introverts tend to process emotions internally, looping them again and again. That overprocessing becomes rumination, and rumination bleeds energy. You're not tired because you've done too much. You're tired because you've thought too long and acted too little. This reversal hack forces the system to release trapped energy through decisive movement and mental command. When you feel emotionally overloaded, pause, stand up, move deliberately. Your body posture directly influences your neurochemistry. A 2010 Harvard study confirmed that upright, assertive posture increases testosterone and lowers cortisol in under 2 minutes. The brain listens to the body, not just the mind. Standing tall, shoulders back, chin level, it sends a signal that you're in control, not under siege. At that moment, repeat one phrase with zero hesitation. This energy builds me. Say it like you mean it. Loud, quiet, or just in your mind, doesn't matter. But you must believe it for your nervous system to respond. The repetition creates neurological anchoring. You're training your mind to associate emotional intensity not with shutdown, but with power. Add this. Focus your eyes on one object, not randomly. Choose something and lock on. It resets your reticular activating system, RAS, which filters what your brain sees as important. Your eye focus affects your attention and stress level. Staring with intention shifts your brain from chaos into command. It won't feel natural at first. That's because you're reversing years of programming. But if you act during the emotional surge, not after, you'll feel the shift. Not calmer, sharper, more precise, not lost in your head anymore, but moving forward, using every ounce of that emotion as fuel. Phase 3. Visual reprogramming, introvert version. Most people who talk about visualization are unknowingly describing what works best for extroverts. They talk about loud energy, bold movements, external wins, and public praise. But for introverts, this approach often feels hollow. It doesn't resonate because introverts process power differently. They don't need loud victories. They need internal certainty. The mind of an introvert is already active, already constructing scenarios, playing possibilities, analyzing outcomes. But without structure, this becomes paralysis, not performance. That's why traditional visualization doesn't help. It overwhelms rather than strengthens. The real method for introverts starts in silence, not visualizing applause or awards, but resistance, the pressure, the heat, the discomfort. Visualize the chaos, being interrupted mid-thought, called out unexpectedly, cornered in a high-stress conversation. Then pause it there. Don't escape it. Stay in that tension and shift the focus. Now see yourself, not flinching, not rushing to explain, not freezing, just still, alert, calm. No fake confidence, no forced performance, just full control. A silent, internal command. I don't shrink here. That single image, you fully grounded in pressure, is the rewire. Then go further. See the aftermath. Not the applause, but the shift. How people respond differently. The subtle respect. The tension breaking in your favor. Not because you were loud, but because your stillness forced others to adjust. Your silence is not absence. It's gravity. Neuroscience backs this. Mirror neurons in the brain allow us to mentally rehearse actions so powerfully that the body begins preparing as if it's real. Predictive coding in your mind starts forming expectations, so next time you're under pressure, the brain doesn't panic. It recognizes the moment. It's seen this before. This time, instead of freezing or spiraling, you act with command. Not because you're louder, but because you're neurologically rehearsed. Real power for introverts is not about being someone else. It's about controlling what's already within. This is how you reprogram your response from hesitation to quiet dominance, and it begins in silence. Phase 4. Strategic silence as a weapon. Silence isn't weakness. It's a calculated force few have the discipline to master. Most people speak to fill space, to validate themselves, to avoid discomfort. But introverts carry an inherent advantage: comfort in silence. When controlled, that silence becomes a weapon. Not passivity, not hesitation, precision. Introverts often think their quiet nature makes them less powerful in conversations, debates, or leadership. The opposite is true. When speech is rare, it carries weight. People lean in when someone who rarely talks decides to speak. There's gravity in restraint. That's why strategic silence works. It throws others off balance, especially in moments where emotional reaction is expected. In negotiations, top-level operators don't rush to reply. They wait. The other side gets uncomfortable, fills the gap, reveals too much. In that pause, power shifts. Controlled silence breaks assumptions. It applies invisible pressure. The one who speaks least often influences the most. Even in confrontations, silence holds tension longer than any aggressive comeback. People expect resistance. When they get nothing but calm stillness, their emotional rhythm shatters. For introverts, the key is using this naturally, not as avoidance, but as dominance. The rule is simple: speak 80% less, observe 200% more. Let your silence gather data. Let your calm unsettle noise. And once you decide to respond, do it with intention. Short, clear, necessary. Every word becomes sharp because it was earned through stillness. Try this. For the next 24 hours, say only what needs to be said. Count to 5 before replying in emotionally charged moments. Watch how people react. Most will feel your energy shift without understanding why. That's strategic silence. It protects your mental energy, commands authority without effort, and forces others to face their own noise. It's not about staying quiet forever. It's about controlling when you engage. That's power. Words lose value when they're thrown around, but silence, especially in a loud world, builds presence. In rooms full of volume, the quietest person often controls the direction, not by force, but by restraint, timing, and unshakable calm. Dark side, when power turns into isolation. When introverts tap into high levels of psychological control, there's a dangerous shift that can start slowly and silently. At first, it's empowering. Silence becomes a weapon. Emotional detachment offers clarity. Overthinking turns into strategy. But in that pursuit of unshakable strength, something essential begins to fade: your ability to feel. And it doesn't happen all at once. It begins with subtle changes. You stop laughing from your chest. Jokes that used to move you now feel hollow. People speak about love or vulnerability, and it sounds distant, like static. You're still there, technically, but not all the way in. Introverts already spend a lot of time inside their minds. It's how they recharge and process. But when you pair that with a cold mental override system, the mind becomes a fortress. What started as protection turns into isolation. You become unreadable. People stop trying to connect with you emotionally, not because they don't care, but because they can't feel anything coming back. Your presence may command respect, even fear, but human connection thins out. You no longer get moved by things that once gave you warmth. And eventually, numbness starts to feel normal. That's the risk most don't talk about when teaching emotional control. The cost is not just external, it's neurological. The brain operates on a use it or lose it system. Emotional responses are built into neural pathways. If those pathways aren't activated regularly, they weaken. Plasticity works both ways. You can grow resilience or you can grow numbness. Constantly suppressing connection trains your brain to default to neutrality, even in moments that should bring you joy, empathy, or closeness. That's why introverts, more than anyone, must protect one thing: access to their emotional anchor. It might be a friend who doesn't judge, a parent who grounds them, a partner who sees through the silence. This is not about being soft. It's survival for your humanity. There has to be a reset, a simple, consistent ritual where power takes a back seat and feeling gets air. That could mean one honest conversation per week where no masks are worn, or moments of physical connection, a hug you hold for longer than you're used to, eye contact that isn't rushed. These aren't distractions, they're emotional maintenance. Because without them, the armor you build to dominate pressure starts suffocating you from the inside. You become efficient, focused, powerful, and utterly alone. You'll know you've crossed the line when people stop missing you. Not because they forgot, but because you train them to stop expecting you to be emotionally available. That's the cliff most powerful introverts don't notice until they've already fallen. And at that point, coming back isn't impossible, but it's much harder. So the cost of being unbreakable isn't just pain, it's losing access to what made the pain worth surviving in the first place. Neural weaponry, energy control system. Your brain is built for performance, but only if you know how to control it when it counts. Most introverts run on silent intensity. They feel everything, process everything, but rarely discharge that energy. That quiet intensity can either turn into power or pressure. The difference comes down to how your neurological system is managed under stress. 3 tools can completely shift how you operate without changing your personality. They don't require hours of effort, they require moments of control. The first tool is alpha entrainment. When your brain is under pressure, it switches into high beta frequencies. Fast, panicked, scattered. That's when overthinking kicks in, decision-making stalls, and fatigue grows fast. Alpha frequencies, on the other hand, are associated with calm alertness and dominant presence. You enter alpha naturally when you're in the zone, but waiting for that state isn't reliable, so you train it manually. Breath control, specifically the 4-7-8 method, inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7, exhale for 8, signals your nervous system to slow down and return to parasympathetic mode. Add in 10 minutes of alpha wave binaural beats, and you start teaching your brain to enter that state on command. Do this daily, and eventually, your brain builds a shortcut. In high-stress moments, a single breath can become a trigger. That calm is not passive, it's silent control. Second is the impulse override. Introverts often have sharp internal reactions to stress or disrespect, but instead of expressing it, it builds up. That pressure doesn't disappear, it leaks into your decisions, tone, and even posture. The override technique is brutal in its simplicity. The next time you feel a reaction building, anger, shame, overwhelm, pause for exactly 10 seconds. Say nothing, move nothing, just hold. Those 10 seconds are your neurological pivot point. During that space, cortisol peaks and starts to drop. Your prefrontal cortex regains command. You go from emotional reactivity to calculated presence. It's not about denying emotion, it's about stopping the reflex so you can make a conscious choice instead of an unconscious mistake. The third tool is dopamine fasting. Your energy is not low because you're lazy, it's fractured. Most introverts scroll to escape, not to connect. Every swipe, every notification floods your system with microdoses of stimulation. Over time, your brain stops responding to real rewards and starts chasing noise. One day per week, cut out every cheap hit, social media, fast dopamine loops, overstimulating content. You'll feel boredom at first. That's withdrawal. That's your real brain calling you back. By resetting your reward baseline, your ability to focus and feel internal energy comes back stronger than before. Now link it all into one system. Morning, wake, sit, breathe, no noise, one command to self. Midday, pause the loop. Break the pattern, stand, reset, visualize execution. Night, shut off tech, sit in silence, let your system drop. This reset loop doesn't make you more active, it makes your action precise. Introverts don't need louder minds, they need cleaner ones. This is how you build internal command without becoming emotionally exhausted. You're not adding more to your day, you're removing the noise and letting clarity do the heavy lifting. Identity programming, who you must become. Most introverts move through life as observers, often reading the room before anyone speaks, quietly aware of tension, emotions, and unspoken dynamics. This awareness is a gift, but it can also become a cage if you let your internal story label you as someone who watches rather than leads. The brain doesn't care whether you're shy or powerful. It simply responds to the repetition of thoughts, language, and patterns. Every time you think, "I'm not made for this," or "I need more time," your neural pathways reinforce that identity, locking in hesitation as your default response under pressure. But identity is not fixed. It's software. You can rewrite it by consistently feeding your brain the patterns you want to hard code. Repetition isn't just habit, it's biology. Your neurons fire together and wire together, forming identity not through truth but through exposure. When introverts repeat narratives of self-doubt, overthinking, or invisibility, those traits begin to feel like facts. They're not, they're just practiced thoughts. Start shifting that script the moment your day begins. Before the world starts demanding your attention, command your mind. One simple phrase, repeated with full attention, becomes a neural anchor. Something like, "I am the quiet commander of my environment." Say it standing tall. Feel the shift in your body language. The words are not magic. The repetition is. It sends signals to the brain to expect command, not fear. That expectation becomes your nervous system's new reference point. Later, when anxiety spikes or you're about to fold under pressure, close your eyes. Briefly, intentionally, replay a recent moment where you were quiet but powerful. See yourself not as frozen but as calculated. Change the meaning. You're not silent because you're afraid. You're silent because you observe before you move. This shift, done repeatedly during stress, rewires your brain to associate silence with strength instead of uncertainty. End your day by reinforcing the signal again. Whisper to yourself, "Silence fed my strength today." It doesn't matter if you stumbled or felt invisible. What matters is sending the message to your brain that restraint is power, that your identity is being built with precision. Neural loops don't need perfection, they need consistency. Facts back this. The brain forms habits through repetition and emotional charge. When you anchor your new identity with emotion, especially during stress, it sticks. Research shows that affirmations during anxiety trigger more neural rewiring than during calm. You're literally teaching your brain who you are in the heat of the moment. That's where transformation happens, not in theory, but in action. You're not here to speak the loudest, you're here to speak last, and with the most weight. The quietest person in the room often carries the most presence, not because they try to, but because they've trained their brain to see stillness as strength. That's the shift. You're not changing your personality. You're refining it into something deliberate, something undeniable. And every day you repeat the command, your brain listens, then it obeys. Final evolution, the line between human and inhuman. Being strong is one thing. Staying human while carrying that strength is something else entirely. Most people who tap into extreme power forget what it means to feel. They become hard, efficient, cold. That might work in a boardroom or battlefield, but it doesn't work in real life. Not when you're sitting across from someone who just needs your presence, not your dominance. Introverts are already built for silence, but if that silence turns into emotional withdrawal, you start to lose the one thing that makes all this power worth having: connection. There's a fine edge between being unbreakable and being numb. One gives you presence, the other drains your soul quietly, without warning. Right now, you've trained your mind to override pain, control emotion, and switch to calculated stillness under fire. That's strength most people will never taste. But power without balance becomes poison. The truth is, real power isn't in how well you control others. It's how well you control yourself and still remain reachable. When you stop reacting, when you learn to override anger and silence emotional chaos, something incredible happens. People start to feel your presence. You become the calm in any storm, but the warning is real. If you don't ground that presence with human emotion, you become unreadable, untouchable, and slowly, emotionally unreachable, even to yourself. This is where most strong men fall. They think emotional control means never showing feeling. But showing feeling isn't weakness. Letting it control you is. So here's what separates those who rise from those who vanish inside their own armor. Discipline without emotional intelligence is just another form of blindness. You've got to use the override, but only once this week, in a moment where your old self would have snapped. Pick that moment with intent. Then, hold silence when you're triggered. Don't retaliate, don't explain, don't justify. Just hold, and let the tension teach you. Find the emotional parasite that's been feeding off you. Maybe it's needing approval. Maybe it's the habit of shutting down. Maybe it's rage you can't explain. Starve it, let it rise, and don't give in. 7 days, no permission. You'll see who really controls who. This is the discipline that turns power into depth. Not just control, but purpose. You're rare now. Not because you're loud, because you're focused. Because you speak only when it matters, and when you do, it hits harder than noise ever could. That kind of presence isn't built in comfort. It's forged in silence, action, and restraint. Comment below your override phrase, the one that shuts down your emotional chaos and locks you into absolute control. Then subscribe. Because strength like this isn't one time. It has to be sharpened daily.